Chronometry calibrated. The gateway will open in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Analyzing data. Likelihood of parallel universes now at 7%. Continuing analysis of the many worlds hypothesis.
I ask you, to what end? Dread it, run from it. Podcasting arrives all the same. And now it's here. Welcome, everyone. I'm Gayfesh. Joining me, as always, is the lovely DemonMama.
Hello, thank you.
And Moss.
Hello, I'm also here.
And today we are going to be discussing Avengers Infinity War, which I did leave off our last episode by saying is, in my opinion, the strongest Marvel film. And I think there is an inner DemonMama in my head that has slowly been poisoning me
No.
to everything. Because I was watching... I have to do like a 2-watch thing now, because I do the first one where I look at it with a critical eye and then go, wow, I don't like Marvel movies as much as I used to. Which, like, to be fair, like, that has been a growing thing, but that was mostly just like, oh man, phases 4 and 5 are just terrible. But, like, you know, having that inform like my previous stuff, so I have to do a second viewing where I'm just watching it to enjoy it, because I feel like that gives me a better, more rounded review of it anyway. But enough about my issues with DemonMama encroaching on my brain. DemonMama, you're here now, so you can encroach on everyone else's brain. This is your first time watching it. What did you think?
Anyway, no, I hated this movie so much.
No.
Oh my god, I hated this movie so much. I was like, actually, I like Black Panther a lot more now. There was, oh my god, like, okay, so I thought about this a lot because I watched it earlier in the week this week and had a lot more time to stew on it, although it was wild. Like, after I watched Black Panther, I felt like I had a ton to talk about, and I was like, with this movie, I was just like, I don't know what to even talk about with this movie. But I think I've thought about it now. I think, first of all, that I imagine that people would like this movie a lot more if they had just freshly watched every single other Marvel movie that ties into this one, especially Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy in this movie, but this movie, the thing that pissed me off the most about it, the thing that made me just go, what am I even doing with my time anymore, is the fact that none of the characters actually, they don't have anything in this movie. None of them. Almost, like, I don't think a single one of them has anything in this movie that actually ties into who they are as a character, besides maybe a little bit Gamora. Gamora is her name, I think. Yeah. Besides maybe Gamora, because she has that direct relationship with Thanos. But even that is, like, quite shallow. All of the other characters, including even Thor, who gets a lot of screen time, they don't actually, there's nothing. Thor just goes to a place and does a thing. He doesn't, that thing doesn't tie into Thor's arc, his responsibility, or his difficulty being a god, or any of the things that have appeared in the previous movies. We haven't really followed Thor's storyline, so there's not much of that anyway. But watching this movie, I was just like, we're not learning anything. We're not touching on any of the themes of this characters. Captain America, not a single thing in this movie had anything to do with any of the themes or struggles he had in the previous movies. There was
literally, the writers were considering how late that they even wanted to introduce Captain America into the film, because they knew that it wasn't going to be a Cap-heavy movie. But there was even talk of the first time that you see him on screen was showing up to rescue Vision from Corvus Glaive in Wakanda. So when he runs up to get the guy when the guy's stabbing him the second time, that could have been Cap's first introduction into this movie. And, like, in terms of what he does for the film, the only thing that would impact is you'd need another connection to Wakanda. Somebody else would be like, oh, well, I know Black Panther too, but, you know, I think it's easier for Steve, right? But can I reframe your view of the movie? Because I agree that people show up basically when they're needed to progress the plot along. And a big part of that is because you are trying to look for the protagonist of the film. And there is a protagonist of the film, and his name is Thanos.
Yeah, it's Thanos. Yeah, and I mean, Thanos was my favorite character in this movie for multiple reasons. Partially just because
He has the most screen time of any character.
Absolutely.
And also like because this movie ends on a cliffhanger, I tend not to like cliffhangers because usually they are written without the follow-up in mind. And I still think that was the case here. I think this was written before they knew how Endgame was going to play out. But because typically the cliffhanger is like, oh, how are the heroes going to get their way out of this one? And what's the resolution? That's not how this one is framed. The last shot of the film before the post-credits sting and everything like that is Thanos smiling upon a sunrise in his mind, a grateful universe. He had a goal, he set it out, and he accomplished it. So when you look at the movie as Thanos' movie, as the villain protagonist, he has an arc, he sets out, and he accomplishes it. So it's a complete movie. And that's why I think the cliffhanger works.
I see it. I see that. I just think that like it would need to be more. In order for it to work for me, I would need that movie to be more about Thanos. Like it needs to be an origin story movie or something along those lines for Thanos, because so much of the movie is spent hopping between characters who aren't. Their purpose there is to make the movie make sense on a very basic plot level. Like you have to see how these characters get together because you can't just have them all teleport up to show up and fight Thanos. I think you could if you made a movie that was just, here's Thanos' story. He's trying to get these last stones. He gets attacked by these random people that he's never seen before, except in his magical visions using his like magical Palantir orb or whatever. And then he arrives on Earth and the heroes have assembled to fight him from his perspective. I do think that would have been a cool movie and it would have worked. But this one instead was like, yes, Thanos is the like main character of the movie, but you spend all this time with like the logistics of heroes getting to a place and figuring out what they need to know in order to fight Thanos. And that's it. So all of these characters are just totally flattened out in lieu of, I don't know, a clabbered together movie. I'll talk about more. I don't want to say everything I have to say about the movie right now. I want to give Moss room to like, yeah, but that's my feelings. That's a summary of where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this movie kind of struggles a little bit. Like, I feel like the first time I remember watching this movie back in the day, and like this is one that I've rewatched probably more than a lot of other ones, because for a while my partner and I were doing let's watch all the movies in order. And so I felt like, well, I need to watch the more recent movies. So I just would watch Infinity War and Endgame, just like bust out a whole day. And yeah, so if clearly I enjoy them, they have like value as far as going back to watch them. But I do distinctly remember the very first time I watched it. They're introducing all these different characters and there's all this stuff going on. And Captain Rogers is like, I know somewhere we can go to fix Vision. And I was just like, where is it? And it was Wakanda. And I just remember being like, oh yeah, that feels dumb of me. But also at this point, there's so many characters and each one, like in their own movie, you feel emotionally attached to. But when you start throwing them all together, I do feel like one of the big weaknesses of this movie is that it relies so much on your emotional investment from previous iterations. Like, yeah,
totally.
Which is
well, I would
natural.
also say like the reaction that you have of where could Cap mean? Like, I never had that question because I was paying attention to the music and you can hear the African drums start playing before he even says it. So.
I have a hard time I love the music aspect of it, but I really have a hard time paying attention to it, which I guess a lot of the times that means that the music is effective if I don't notice what it's doing. But yeah, I completely missed that.
and to be fair, I am a musician, so like,
sure,
yeah.
There was one thing that I wanted to build off of with what you just said about like the movies relying on your emotional investment in other ones. Mm-hmm. They lampshade that so much in the script of this movie. In fact, the movie opens with like Peter Parker appears and he's like, you see Doctor Strange. And I was like, immediately I was like, oh, okay. When the movie opened, the second it opened and it was Doctor Strange, I'm like, oh my God, like they're not going to like introduce this character in any way because they're going to assume that everyone's seen the Doctor Strange movies and all that. And probably fresh, if I remember correctly, that movie came out very recently before this. And I was like, ooh, that's going to be really weird. And it was indeed very weird. They have Doctor Strange come in, and then I did not expect them to lampshade it, where Peter Parker goes, oh, well, who the heck's this guy? Mr. Stark? And he's like, oh, he's a magic wizard. He has a stone. That's all you need to know.
It was like, this guy's an alien. He's here to steal a necklace from a wizard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, wow. Damn, have a little pride in your damn work. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I hate the lampshading. It happens like 4 times in the movie where there's like some plot contrivance that's like lampshaded in one way or another. It's like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, of course it doesn't.
They have Thor and Star-Lord explain the plots of their last movies to each other.
Oh, yeah.
I guess there's not much that they need to do. I mean, they have like a brief acknowledgement of like when T'Challa is assembling, his army, and he's talking to Okoye and like the border tribe, those that are left, which, obviously references, oh yeah, they did kind of kill a bunch of them in the Civil War.
I think there's another line with the Hulk where it's like, where have you been, buddy? And he's like, you don't even want to know about it. Looks at the camera, and it's like, like then they play an ad for Thor Ragnarok or whatever. It's like, okay. Like, all right, guys. All right. Come on.
There was a discussion that got kicked up in my friend Discord about this movie that I feel like we would be remiss not bringing up, in that Thanos' whole plan obviously is stupid on its face. You can't snap half of the universe and think that's going to solve overpopulation problems. It's eco-fascist Malthusian nonsense. But the film doesn't actually do a lot to like counter his claims. It's just like, yeah, but you'd be murdering so many people, it'd be genocide, and that wouldn't even work. Because if you Thanos snapped the human population, we're at 8 billion now. We reached 4 billion in 1974. So Thanos would be committing universal genocide to set everyone back 50 years. And then you've got that problem again in 50 years.
Redfern to 1974. Redfern, we can get the sideburns back.
You can grow sideburns in any decade. Like that's never been like a law. You can have whatever facial hair you want. You're allowed.
That's true. No, it made me laugh. One of the things that I think I liked and also hated, but like, okay, I found Thanos entertaining because he is by far the stupidest of the villains that they've introduced yet. It's like just monumentally dumb, and it lays it bare how much of this movie relies on weird contrivance that you're just supposed to go, okay, I guess. Dude, double the amount of resources or triple the amount of resources. Yeah. You have the magical stone of a god. Why do you need to kill everyone? Now, I went and looked. I had heard that there was a reason for this in the comic books, and I don't know if there is in the Endgame, because I've seen it. I have no spoilers on Endgame except for, no, I don't think I will. And I don't know the context of that yet. Sure. So we'll find out. But as I understand it in the comics, he's in love with the goddess of death. And he's thinks
death.
That killing...
Not just the goddess of death. She's death. She is death.
Death herself. Okay, so, and he thinks that by killing half the universe, she'll be like, oh my God, baby, that's so sweet of you.
Exactly.
But that doesn't exist here. So he's just so stupid. He's just like, oh, okay, well, we got to kill half of everybody. Why not make double the resources? Why not double the planet size?
I think the point there was the writers were cowards and didn't want to embrace, like, it. Having death personified as a baddie that Thanos wants to impress is not outside the ridiculousness that already exists in the MCU.
Oh, not even a little bit.
We would totally accept that. It would be fun. It would be schlocky. But because the MCU has been doing the thing where the villain has to have a point, because they need to bring up some villain who's there to criticize the status quo, so that the people can be like, yeah, no, that's a good point, but you did kick a puppy, so the heroes have to keep everything the way they are, except they're a little nicer. They're Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. But in so doing, by having Thanos be like, no, I care about, the environment and about, overpopulation. So I have to do the genocide that way. It's like, okay, but then you're trying to say, well, maybe there's merits to it. And there's mathematically not.
Yeah, it's just dumb.
Like, you don't even have to get into the morality of it. Mathematically, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't work because he is trying to apply a linear solution to an exponential problem.
I like that he throws in the line, like, oh my God, there's this line where he's like, my solution is perfectly fair. It doesn't care about rich or poor. It's random, 100% random. I'm like, well, okay, if it's 100% random, then like it is very possible that a bunch of poor people, like, there's more poor people. There's going to be more dead poor people than there are rich people if it's 100%
That's
random.
true.
Like, and it's like, so it's just dumb. It's every turn. It's just dumb. It's just like this movie. At the end, I was like, I felt like there was a Marvel studio exec saying, would you just shut the fuck up and eat your fucking popcorn? God damn it, you hog. Like, it really was the first one where I felt like it was like, just don't fucking think, sit down. The other part that drove me absolutely batty, and I felt like I was like, this is like, I actually, in retrospect, was like, fucking justice for Black Panther, god damn it. Like, that movie was too good to be marred by this film, which is that they go to Wakanda and they're like, Wakanda, we need your help. There's aliens attacking. And Wakanda's like, we got you. We have all the most advanced technology in the world that we showed off in Black Panther. We're going to use essentially none of it. We're going to send 1,000 soldiers to line up in pre-World War I, like Revolutionary War tactic blocks, stand next to the edge of our giant thing and get slaughtered en masse in
Where
the
are
dumbest
their
thing.
spaceships? Wakanda has so many spaceships. Where are those spaceships?
They have spaceships. They have cannons that shoot magic spears. They have probably all kinds of cool tricksy devices that could beat these aliens. It was like the most contrived, we need bad guys to punch in a big epic battle scene. It was so, I was just like, why is this happening? Why are they doing this? I don't know.
Big battle sequences in this movie, and they're both, toward the end of the film. And it's the battle for Wakanda and the battle on Titan. And like pretty much universally everyone agrees like the battle on Titan is the good one and the battle on Wakanda is just bad. And it's because the battle on Titan, you don't have your CGI army. It's everyone versus Thanos. And like the people on Titan are like some of the heavier hitters. Like Doctor Strange is easily one of the most powerful beings in the MCU. You've got Tony Stark, whose technology is like on par at least with Wakanda. You've got Spider-Man, who, despite his his teeny stature, he literally is one of, like, you see it at the beginning of the movie where he catches that big hammer thing just casually. So he's very strong. So you have all these heavy hitters against Thanos. You got the Guardians against him, and it wasn't enough. It was, like by the end of that fight, Thanos goes all that for a drop of blood. But there's also creative things that they do. The Doctor Strange using his portals to and like people dodging in and out, getting quick hits on Thanos so that he can't react in time. There's all of the attempts to keep Thanos from closing his glove because he has to close his glove to use it. There's a lot of creative stuff that goes into that fight. There's also a lot of CGI mess. It's not a perfect fight, but it's the better fight. And it's clear that the actual thought went into it.
My favorite fight in this, yes, you're right. Like there was definitely more thought in that one. The one on Wakanda was a mess. It was just guys, remember in Lord of the Rings when there was an epic battle? Like we can have an epic battle too. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I wanted to say that I think the best fight in the movie, like visually and as far as like feeling heavy and really impactful, was the one in the beginning with Thor, Hulk, and Thanos. When Thanos and Hulk are like pounding into each other and they're like doing martial arts moves on each other, and you've got like Thanos breaking out like these structured wrestling moves. And
it was
Hulk
like Mike
going
Tyson
bonkers.
Versus Muhammad Ali.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was like I was like, damn, that was like, okay, cool. We have a fight here that feels like there's stakes going on. There's two very different fighting styles. They're both gigantic hulking guys. Who's going to win? How are they going to win? Cool. that was my favorite one. I went, okay, all right, cool. There was in the fight on Titan, there was two things that really bothered me about that fight. The first was the fact that they, at multiple points in this movie, show Doctor Strange severing powerful beings, limbs, body parts, etc., with his portals. And there's this part where they get Thanos like tied down, and they're all like pulling on the glove to get it off. And like, I know, like, I'm kind of, I do this a lot. I'm like batting at these like movies that are like, they're like kid brained movies, but like, it's so funny seeing all of these like heroes that have full military weaponry in their body. Like Iron Man and Spider-Man both have military grade. They're shooting lasers. They're like Iron Man cuts through the hull of a ship with a laser in space, but he doesn't pop that out of his chest to cut Thanos' arm off. And then, of course, there's the other question.
We literally
just use the portal.
Yeah, we literally saw a portal cut off a guy's hand earlier in the movie.
Yeah, within the same film. It was a big guy and it was his left hand, I'm pretty sure. It's like all of the things that a normal film student would go, that's foreshadowing, and then they just don't do anything with it.
Yeah. And they don't do it. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so what's going to happen in this movie? I was like, I don't know how he's going to resolve it. I assumed that it was going to be something like you cut off his hand, but it doesn't matter because he already has them. So he's basically a god. So he just seals his hand back on. He's like, you thought that was going to stop me? They don't even try. They're just like kids trying to pull off a glove off of this guy. And I'm like,
that would be so fucking cool. Okay, so there is a comic run. I know I had you read one of the issues called Immortal Hulk. And,
oh my God, so good. So good. That's right. You're hearing me praising comic books. It's amazing, okay?
So, but you haven't even read the issue that I'm talking about, where basically, so Immortal Hulk is a take on the Hulk that is far more from like a horror perspective. And there is a scene where Hulk has been cut to pieces and his individual pieces are being stored in jars in a lab. But he still has full control over everything. And he literally, I am not joking, snaps his finger and breaks the glass of the jar that his hand is in so that he can like go and like reassemble himself and fuck shit up. That would be really cool if they chopped off Thanos' hand. And it'd be like, but he's got the fucking Infinity Gauntlet, so he's already got certain power. He's got the fucking Reality Stone. Reality doesn't. If he can alter what reality is, he doesn't need his hands to be connected there. He controls reality. So, yeah, no, there are ways to do that. It's just that wasn't thought of. And while we're talking about things that they could have done to take him out and that they didn't think of, there is a moment in this movie that is very George Lucas in its writing. And it is when Doctor Strange uses the Time Stone to look at all possible futures and determines that there is only one possible future in which they win. And even though Thanos wins in the end here, you have Tony say, we're in the end game now and there was no other way, implying that the future that he saw, Thanos still had to win first before they could stop him.
Yeah, Strange said. He said Tony.
It's funny you bring up George Lucas there because
but what I'm saying is what that means is that anytime we look at something and go, well, why didn't they just do this? You can say, oh, well, then that wouldn't have been the one timeline where it worked.
And it didn't work in some other universe.
The Force, even though like
it's predeterministic.
The most obvious example is Peter Quill fucking up the plan by hitting Thanos and breaking Mantis's hold over him, because you see that they literally have the gauntlet off. Like Thanos basically just grabs back onto it with like the tips of his fingers because it is that far gone. And you're telling me that if Peter hadn't done that and they would have gotten the gauntlet off, but Thanos would have still won anyway? Is that what you're telling me?
It's funny too because
to swallow that
specifically too, like, does Doctor Strange, like, he does not have any control over what Nebula says or does. It's Nebula saying something about Gamora being gone to Quill that then makes him freak out about it. So it's like, there's so many variables that would be obviously outside of Strange's control. He can't really control anything and thread this needle. Things just have to happen exactly perfectly. But it's like, it's the perfect post hoc explanation. You know, You write the answer at the bottom. The answer is at the bottom. Well, you know,
Well, it was the will of the Force,
and it had to happen. Exactly. Yeah.
It is
and
funny
like,
that you said that
yeah, go
because
ahead.
at that point when he's like, how many universes were there, whatever, and then I was just like, this would have been a perfect moment for Tony Stark to do a never tell me the odds, like
Yeah.
like, and this now I was just like, never tell me the odds, like
Mhm.
Han Solo. But I don't know. Yeah, you're right in that it is like, this movie is, that's why I said like the shut up and eat your fucking hot popcorn, you hog. Like,
Mhm.
that's why it feels like that, because it's like, no, actually it had to happen that way. There's like a write out for the writers to like, it's right in line with all the lamp shading. Where it's like, no, yes, it is silly, isn't it? But trust us, we have a plan. And the plan is, it had to be that way because God, meaning me, the writer, works in mysterious ways. My God, like, I don't know.
I feel like once you throw in destiny as a real concept in stories, you rob a lot of like plot tension from it, because once we're told that there's only one way that they can win, and once Stephen Strange looks at the audience and says, "This is the only way. This is the end game. There was no other way." After everyone's been snapped. Like, you're telling everyone, obviously, and like, of course, we know the good guys are going to win in the end because this is a Marvel movie, and we know there's a sequel to Infinity War coming out a year later. But by doing that whole thing, by saying, I've seen all the possible futures and this is the only one, it's like, okay, so any stupidity that happens, great, you've just excused yourself from it.
Yeah,
it's lazy
like,
writing, and they shouldn't have done it.
Well, the whole thing is like, in a movie like this. No.
If all of your fans, listen, if all of your fans are annoying little whiny bitches who do nothing but pick your work apart all day, I feel like it's a genius level move to write in yourself a little excuse like that. But
using logic that they would accept. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you shut the fuck up, you annoying little. Yeah, like I completely would cover my ass that way as a Marvel writer. Yeah.
Like, in a story like this, where it's like, yeah, the good guys are going to win in the end. The interesting part has to be the how. Like, how are they going to do that? But if it's just like, if you take time within the narrative to basically be like, it doesn't matter how they get there, what matters is that they did, then you're like, okay, well, you've stomped out the two possibilities you have for this type of story to be like interesting, outside of like key jangling, which is like, ooh, lights are flashing in front of my eyes, which is like, I guess that was where this movie decided to go, because there certainly was a lot of lights flashing in front of my eyes. And this is random, but I need to talk about the funniest part of the movie for me. And that was with the Soul Stone, when they go to some strange scary planet, and there's like a big structure and there's a Nazgul there, and it's like and then he's like, yes, I know. And when he revealed his face, I'm not kidding you, I cracked up laughing. I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And it's like, also, it was really funny because there's this line where he's like, you don't understand what you have to give up. It's like I know firsthand what you have to give up to try to do this or whatever. And he says some line about like, you don't know what you have to give up. And it was so funny because Doe was like, he had to give up his German identity because he no longer has an accent for some reason. And I was like, literally made me die laughing, just being like, oh my God. Like, that part just it made me laugh. I don't know why they did that. I legitimately don't understand like what their rationale, besides like a Leo DiCaprio snapping at the TV, like it's Red Skull, it's Red Skull. Like, why is the weird Nazi guy the keeper of the Soul Stone? Like, and I don't know. This movie was so strange too, in that as a part of that scene, there's like a horrific and gruesome murder of your like child murder. And like the overarching theme of that is like literally a genocidaire who makes a child like kidnaps a child and makes them into a soldier, and then sacrifices that child, and then is completely convinced that he loves the child still. emotionally at least. And then like all of this is like, but it's like Red Skull is like standing there in the corner like, hey guys. And I don't know. It's the movie has so much more darkness and blood and violence than the other ones. There's like decapitations, and there's arms getting cut off. There's a horrible somebody getting thrown off a cliff and slamming against a rock and dying, a character that you like. But it's like constantly deflated, and it doesn't seem to really have a place where it can like breathe in the story. That whole section, just the Red Skull just standing there kind of watching while this happens is like the most funny thing. I couldn't even sit there and like parse what they're trying to say, which was, you know, not that much admittedly, but at least it was something. It's like there's an abusive parent story going on here. There's this whole like Machiavellian commentary, what are you willing to do and all this stuff. But it's just like, there's not much of that. Like there's a little bit, they kind of like nod to it, and it's depicted without a whole lot of like counter position. But even still, the whole time you just have this goof ass guy standing in the corner. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
There was something that you said about like choices people have to make, and there was the whole, you know, argument about Vision, where Vision asks Wanda to kill him, which, you know, eventually she does, but that's after all other options have been exhausted. And like, you know, there's the whole, we don't trade lives, Captain, but or Captain's like, we don't trade lives, and Vision's like, you laid down your life to save like the world in World War II, and he's like, yeah, but I made a choice. And like, okay, Vision's making that choice. Now, obviously, it's not just Vision, because Wanda is the only one with the power to do it, so she has to also agree. But given that all other options were exhausted and she had to do it anyway, even before like Thanos shows up with the time stone and undoes it, and then snaps half the universe, how many Wakandans died to delay Vision's death?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
again,
you're like, we're not going to let Vision die. We're going to let all of these black people die instead.
Yes. I hold still, like, I said it earlier that it's like kind of tongue in cheek, but it is kind of true that if you think about this movie too much, that like the message of the entire Wakanda section is offensive in like a really roundabout way, where it's like, yeah, you're 100% correct. This is unfortunately like a continued theme through the Marvel movies, like, but specifically post like Age of Ultron. I feel like they kind of like, or maybe I guess a little bit in Civil War, but they kind of move away from it even in Civil War, where it's like there's a point where these movies where really like anybody who's not a hero does not matter anymore at all. They are not a thing to consider. We talked about this with the Black Panther, where it's like it's a movie from the perspective of royals and nations. Yeah, where are the random people? They don't matter. There's no actual story that has to do with the everyday person of any type. And that's especially bad in this movie, where it's just like, who cares? Why do you care? Why do you care? Those are just CGI people getting blown away for your jingle, jingle, jingle. It's also like, it's one of those things where it is kind of a giant slap in the face that like the entire movie is centered around this, like, oh yeah, it matters to like have a choice in this like self-sacrifice, and then they have the Thanos just undo the self-sacrifice, like, you know, oh yeah, actually I rewound it. And in another story right now, I'm like, when you brought that scene, I immediately thought of Berserk. Berserk is a story that like it's a really, really like almost unrelentingly dark. I shouldn't say unrelentingly, but it is an incredibly dark storyline, and a lot of the story centers around the idea of people having power over you that you can do almost nothing about. Or nothing about in some cases, where it's like what you can do is like survive, and you have to find a way for that to be what carries you forward, even if there is no catharsis in like getting your revenge or anything like that. Like, you know, I'm not going to spoil specifics, but Berserk like deals with that as a theme, and like someone undoing a massive sacrifice in that way is like something that would work very well in Berserk. And in fact, is a certain part of Berserk is like, you know, people taking great, horrifically painful, emotionally relevant, spiritually relevant actions that mean nothing because of the action or potentially mean nothing. That's kind of the question that's being asked, is does it mean nothing? Because this horrible person can just completely fuck it up. And so I couldn't help but think of that when you brought that up, because I'm like, oh wow, like this is like the Marvel movie like attempting to steal the emotion. I don't want to say steal, that charged it the wrong way, but to do their own version of like an emotional arc from another better story that would give it room to breathe, and it just doesn't work at all, and instead completely deflates the rest of the movie. I'm just like, I don't know what the hell they were cooking with this movie, but it was not enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it contributes to the inevitability thing that like Thanos himself says a couple different times, like I am inevitable, like, and it gets into it a little bit, you know, in the next movie too. That I don't want to spoil anything, but just generally like the sense of like it was always going to happen this way. It for sure, like the films themselves take on and grapple with this concept of predestiny. Like it's not something that we're just inferring by being like, well, it kind of seems like if only one way wins out of all 14 million or whatever, like it is explicit in the text that it's fated to go down this way, or it must go down this way, which is just, yeah, it's weird. You know, I think that moral obligations or other types of like obligations like this do tend to rob stories of their complexity. It's like on the one hand, I'm trying to be positive about this film in a specific, like, it's a very powerful move to have all of your heroes that you've built up for the last 15 years, like lose badly.
I felt really weird walking out of that theater. I was just like,
yeah,
I like the first time I was like, that's a very unsettling ending. Huh. I just watched half my favorite people die.
Yeah. And for the villain to like, basically like, it's not like entirely without loss on his part, but like, aside from having to make some sacrifices to get to what he wanted, he got everything he wanted, which is brutal. Like it's, and I feel so bad that like that decision and how abnormal it is and how refreshing that is, it like, you can't fully appreciate that because of, I mean, it's like a TV show, these movies, you know, like,
yeah,
you have to watch the previous ones in order to care. And not even just know what's happening, but to care about what's happening as the series progresses and as you get all these, you know, more and more characters getting thrown in the mix and like having to remember. And this is terrible, as I said a few podcasts ago, for the typical viewer. The typical viewer sees this film one time in theaters and then they see the next one in theaters a year or two later or whatever. I mean, I know it's twice a year now with Marvel, but like, yeah, you're relying too much on those previous watch throughs. And so this movie itself doesn't get to be as strong as it could be. But I will say that it is probably one of the stronger ones in the entire series. You know, it does a little bit of the quips. You've got like every once in a while.
There's a lot of quips.
It feels like less annoying than usual. Like they understated it a little bit. Or like it was a little bit more serious of a tone, which I guess I appreciated because of how silly these movies have been in the past.
I mean, like, you've got Thor versus the Guardians. You've got the Guardians just themselves, but of course the Guardians are always goofy. So like, that's expected. But you have the whole the Sanctum Sanctorum scene with Tony and Banner, with Strange and Wong, and like, I'm sorry, the Ben and Jerry's joke never fucking worked for me, and like. That's how I know that it was product placement.
Yeah.
Because it would like, who thought of Honka Polka Brooding Fudge and thought that was a good joke? Like, who the fuck is still an Elvis fan in the year of our Lord 2018 when this movie came out? Like, it's too obscure, and the way Wong says it, like, I don't know, like maybe it just kind of gets lost a bit in the accent or something. I can't quite like. I didn't even realize what he had said the first time I saw the movie, other than that I heard Hulk was in there. So that didn't work.
They wanted to feel like
I think a lot of it too is just DemonMama infecting my brain, because there are a lot of these jokes that I really did like, and now you ruined them for me. No,
you can't blame this on me.
You're a killjoy.
I speak only my truth of these movies, okay? You can call me a killjoy, but perhaps some joys must be killed, okay? There are some things like, okay, and I'm trying. Look, I'm being blamed here for the flaws of the Marvel universe, and I refuse to accept it. However,
why haven't you fixed Kevin Feige's mistakes yourself?
Listen, all I could give me the power, and I would give me the gauntlet. You'll see what the universe will look like under my command. There's so much, like, how do I put this? This movie, one of the things I said to my partner after I finished the end of this movie was that the ending felt manipulative. And I think it is. I think I feel that even more strongly by the end of it. Because okay, so there's the death of Spider-Man. He turns, he's like, "Oh, I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark." Now, It's funny because I've seen a lot of these things referenced via like GIFs and stuff. Like I've seen the perfectly balanced as all things should be. I've seen the snap moment, I've seen the inevitable, I've seen the what did it cost? Everything. All of these moments are, I had I had an emotional reaction to them in their out of context form that when I actually encountered them in the movie, I did not have at all, which is like, that to me screams of a massive failure. It should absolutely be the other way around, that when you get to those lines, but everything around them is so poorly constructed that like even their punchy moments are bad. And that's why I feel like it's kind of manipulative. These movies are designed to invoke a certain emotion that just isn't actually delivered upon at all through the narrative of the movie. The thing with Spider-Man being like, "Mr. Stark," and he falls against him, and it's like, it's invoking fatherliness, but there isn't fatherliness in their story at all, except for maybe you could argue he tells him to go home at one point. But the rest of it is just, oh, wait a minute, this is Tony Stark's.
Yeah, you have to have seen Homecoming.
I guess you have to have seen Homecoming. And there's the thing, is that I understand very well the like concept of sequels, and of movies that are in chains. If you pick up a book that's like, 10 chapters in and you don't know anything else, you're going to be a little confused or whatever. However, if you think about other movies that have many, many sequels and whatever, there are things that make a story capable of standing on its own feet. And this movie cannot stand on its own feet. It is impossible. It does not have within it its own ability to communicate. If you picked up Lord of the Rings, I recently did a full watch through of Lord of the Rings again. All three of the extended movies. We did it over Christmas. It was really fun. Somebody was.
Why does everyone always do that over Christmas?
I don't know, but it is a Christmas movie. I will lay myself on this hill.
It's because the movies, they always came out around Christmas. So it was always a Christmas event.
It did.
Yeah. But it's like warmth. Homey feelings of friendship, feelings of gift giving and camaraderie. It works for Christmas.
The thing is about, okay, so I would love to do a talk about Lord of the Rings sometime because I fucking love those movies. But maybe
we could do those in a future season.
We watched the Lord of the Rings, and I was thinking about this. I'm like, okay, I want to try and put myself in the foot of somebody who picked up The Two Towers, which is like arguably the movie that relies the most on stuff that you've seen before and that you know from the first film. And I'm like, there is so much in that movie that would stand completely on its own, that you could, even if you didn't know the characters and you didn't get every single bit of it, like Theoden. Theoden is introduced as a character. He comes in and there's these other characters who have a camaraderie. Their interactions make sense on their own grounds. There is a story that's being told there that doesn't require you to watch a bunch of other movies. And these movies constantly give you the state that it's your fault that this movie is bad, or it's your fault that this movie is like whatever because you didn't watch 12 other movies. Go watch the 12 other movies. And I'm just okay.
If it had been released as a TV series, like, I think your fault, like, if you just show up for like the penultimate episode of a TV show, it is kind of your fault.
Sure.
For not having seen everything else. But like a TV show, like, in our streaming era, like, it's all accessible right there. Like, you might have paid for access to the streaming service, but that should all be there. Whereas with movies, you're paying for every single one. And
even if you're just watching something serialized on television, there is a recap at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there's
and it's funny that you bring up the Two Towers, though, because I remember the first time I saw Two Towers in theaters, I had big criticisms of it because it relied so much on the knowledge people had from seeing Fellowship of the Ring.
That's why I tried to bring it up as an example, is because I feel like it is a movie that's like that. And yet, nonetheless, if you watch it fresh, there is still so much that you can get from that movie that's like, wow, like I understand what's going on. And then you could watch Return of the King and go, okay, cool. Now I have a throughput that I could go. There's a basic level of storytelling and respect for the characters that lets it stand even as its own movie, even as a movie that has tons of hooks to the first movie.
My boy Faramir.
Yeah. Infinity War. I almost said Infinity Game, which is I've damaged my own brain in this front. I keep saying End War, Infinity Game, Civil Game. But I don't know. I don't know. I hated this movie so much. And like I hope that I've heard that Endgame is going to be a change of pace, which I certainly hope for. And
based on your objections in this movie, I think you're going to enjoy Endgame more.
Okay.
And I still do like Endgame. I still think this was a stronger overall narrative than Endgame is. Obviously we'll get there next episode. But I am very interested to see, because I think I don't hold any expectations that you're going to like anything at this point, because you are kind of a Debbie Downer. But
excuse me, I like Civil War. I was very positive about Civil War.
Fair enough, but I think I can confidently state that you will like Endgame more than you like Infinity War.
For those who are listening to this podcast, listen, just wait. We're going to watch, have we announced what we're going to watch next?
Yeah, we're going to be doing season 1 of Andor next. So.
Yeah, and then you can judge for yourselves. Listen, do your own research. When we talk about Andor, you can decide whether you think I'm just a Debbie Downer or if I know what I'm fucking talking about with this shit.
Yeah, but you also have to consider that, like, well, for one, I mean, as the editor of these podcasts, I see who talks the most, and it's definitely you. But that's also like a given, because you're the one new to these movies. Moss and I have already seen these. Moss hasn't seen Andor, so we're going to be giving Moss a lot more latitude next season.
Hell yeah,
because,
I'm gonna have thoughts.
We've already seen it. So Peter Dinklage as Atri the Dwarf is like right in that era when Game of Thrones was like at its peak and all of its actors were like, oh, well, these guys are all going to be stars, and fucking none of them are stars now. Like Emilia Clarke keeps getting thrown into like dead end, like franchise reboots that never go. Like she played Sarah Connor, and I was like, I think she's the worst of the Sarah Connors. There have been like 3 Sarah Connor actors, and she's definitely the worst. But like, I don't know. The idea of taking Peter Dinklage and saying, we're going to make him the tallest character in the MCU.
I like it.
Was pretty funny. It was pretty funny.
I still think he needs to figure out his accent, but whatever.
He was kind of just doing his... He was really just doing his Tyrion accent, but with a lower register, you know?
Yeah. Which, by the way, his Tyrion accent is not good. That is the criticism I'm leaning here. His bad accent.
Right. Well, okay. So it's easy to forget that he's American because Dinklage is a very British name, and he was on Game of Thrones. So, like, you know, unless you had remembered him from stuff before Game of Thrones, like that episode of 30 Rock where Liz dated him purely because she tried to play off. She was like going baby crazy and was like, oh, there's a kid, I'm going to ruffle his head, and turns around and it's him. And so she has to play it off like she was flirting with him.
My memory holds that. I forgot that completely.
No, that episode was great though. Like he was great in that episode too. But like, unless you remember stuff like that, like it's easy to just forget that he's American.
I did feel like it was kind of an underused role, but I mean, I don't know. Like you barely see his face, like, cause he's got this wig thing going on, and there's that the whole section is very like dark, so you can't really make out everyone's expressions and stuff, except for I guess Rocket Raccoon, because he's like in the ship making faces. But I don't know. That it was kind of funny. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know Peter Dinklage was in this movie. I tend to like Peter Dinklage, and I
will say that there is something cynical about casting Peter Dinklage in this, and it's that Peter Dinklage got a lot of roles after Game of Thrones, right? and a lot of roles that other dwarfs wouldn't get. A lot of roles that his role in Days of Future Past? Yeah, because he was the guy who was creating the Sentinel program in Days of Future Past, and the fact that he was a little person. Yeah, he was a scientist, and the fact that he was a little person was like not even in the script. They just cast him for a role, and like considering how pigeonholed most little actors are in Hollywood into playing, fantasy creatures like munchkins and dwarves and stuff like that, or like they get to be in the suit and play R2-D2 or Marvin the Martian, or sorry, Marvin the android, stuff like that. And like a lot of, Warwick Davis, most roles that you've seen of him, you haven't even seen his face. He's just been in a suit. When you've got here a role and it's like, okay, this character's named Atri the Dwarf. We're going to cast a dwarf. We're going to call up Peter Dinklage's agent because he's hot right now. We're not going to even consider other dwarf actors for this. Mm-hmm. It's just him. There's something cynical there, I think. Not that Peter Dinklage wasn't good in it. I just am looking at the general space for little actors in Hollywood,
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like this movie, like, I don't know, I can't speak to the whole back end of all of those decisions, but I will say that there was a lot of stuff to me that screamed of like cynical studio decisions. I was joking that like they should just put the like audience favorability scores over the characters as they're dissolving. Like just so we can see, you know what I mean? I said that while that was happening. I'm like, let's see.
Get the poll numbers out there.
Yeah, let's get your focus group numbers, because I guarantee you it's right along those lines. I was like, I couldn't believe they dissolved Black Panther. I was like, wow, guys.
You have to consider that this movie was filmed before Black Panther came out. I really think that if they had no idea that Black Panther was going to be as much of a success as it was. Like they really didn't know what they had with that one. And I really
that really
do
speaks
think,
to the favorability thing. Like,
I really do think that if they had known how big it was, that they would not have snapped T'Challa. They probably would have snapped Okoye. And see T'Challa, see Okoye get snapped or something like that. Because it's not like Okoye has like a big role in Endgame or anything like that. Hindsight's 2020, right? Like they just didn't know. But I can also like lament that fact now just because Chadwick Boseman is dead and I would have liked to see more of him in the MCU. That was definitely something that they did not anticipate.
Yeah, I don't think they maybe thought that one through 100%, but I don't know. It was just like I was just like, yeah, this is this end. I think I hated the ending. I was just like it just felt unearned, and also just like, okay, I can see exactly like why they're choosing to dissolve which heroes they dissolve, and
which kind of goes against Thanos' whole thing of it's random, but I can't help but notice that all of the original Avengers did not get snapped.
Interesting. Interesting how that works out, huh?
Which, makes sense for like story wise, like, in the next movie. It's like, okay, well, let's get the original Avengers back together and see how they can, bring everyone back or whatnot. And I should also point out Hawkeye's not in this movie. I remember when the movie came out, Quentin Reviews did a review of the movie, and I remember he like went on this big rant about the movie, and then at the very end of the video goes, Hawkeye wasn't even in this. I just now realized that Hawkeye's not in this movie right at the end of his video. So
I was joking that he dissolved off screen. No, that he's just like at home and goes boof. But they're just like, they don't even bother saying that.
Clint is in Endgame. He's important in Endgame. So yeah, you'll see what happens. It's
I liked him in Civil War.
Yeah. No, I really
Civil War Ultron.
I don't like the person Jeremy Renner very much.
Sure, I don't know much about him,
but I like the character. So I'm happy to see Hawkeye in things.
I think
which is funny
because
nobody cared about him in the first Avengers, right? Like he was like,
oh yeah, no.
Like that's like Joss Whedon's one good like lasting contribution to the MCU is that he got people to actually like Hawkeye.
Yeah, which was yeah. By the way, I don't know anything about Jeremy Renner except I think he has an app that's
Yeah.
like a personality centric app where he's like, it's me. You can log in and listen to voice clips of me and like,
Yeah, and make money.
yeah,
Yeah. It's super
that's kind
weird.
of wild. That I don't know that that's the only thing I've ever heard about him. So I don't know. Maybe he's like not good or whatever. But yeah. So
I didn't come prepared with like a list of allegations or something. I think you can Google it. But anyway, and it also kind of feels a little in poor taste to go over too much of it because that dude did almost fucking die like a year ago. He had a snowplow run over him, and like it's a miracle that he survived at all. Yeah.
Wow.
So no, like I think it was like he could see his organs or something like on the outside. So like the fact that he survived at all, like it is kind of a miracle. But so we'll just leave that where it is. He's not in this movie anyway, so we've spent an awful lot of time talking about a guy who's not even not appearing in this film.
Yeah, it's true.
What else do I have? I'm looking through my notes. Oh, okay. We're you know what? I'm just gonna go with some basic nitpicks. Okay. Space doesn't freeze you, actually. Like, and this is something movies constantly get wrong. Somebody gets thrown out into space and they're immediately covered in ice and like frozen solid. And like, yes, eventually in space you will freeze, but not quickly. Does anybody have a thermos? Do you know how a thermos keeps heat in there so well? Because there's space inside the thermos. Because there's heat has to have a medium to transfer, and if there's no matter around you to transfer that heat, the only way it goes out is through radiation, which is much slower than convection and conduction. So, yeah, when Ebony Maw got frozen immediately after going into space, that bugged me.
That was the alien wizard, right?
Yeah. The four dudes that are Thanos's minions, they're not named, and I think Thanos refers to Ebony Maw as the Maw like once, but none of them are named. But it's Obsidian Cull is the big dude. Corvus Glaive is the guy who is like has the glaive, and then Proxima Midnight is the girl with the goat horns.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're never named. Nope. I just know that because they were in the comics, and so people knew who they were. And like I'm pretty sure they just like took the character designs and then ignored their powers because like they have like a bunch more powers that they were just like, oh, here's the alien henchmen that you get to fight, and most of them are just not memorable at all, except Obsidian Cull's the big Hulk guy, so he gets to fight the Hulk at the end. And
it's just to like wink and
Proxima
nod
Midnight's
again
the girl, so she gets to fight all the girls.
Oh my god!
True.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh,
girl boss.
Okay, that so it's not
funny.
So you've seen The Boys, so like the girls get it done like parody, but that the she's not alone is not what they're parodying. That comes next movie. Although it was clearly set up here as trying to be kind of a girl boss moment, because like Proxima is like, he'll die alone, as will you. And then she's not alone. And it's like, oh, there's Black Widow to save Scarlet Witch. And there's Okoye. There's, the other girl who's on the field.
A big girl fight that doesn't offend anyone in the audience because it's girls punching other girls.
Right. Like, and I'm gonna say this now, and I'll repeat it next movie because She's Got Help is coming, and it's not enough to just have the big showy moments where you're like, look at our girl characters being girl bosses. It's the small moments. When have these characters ever interacted?
Mm-hmm.
What are Widow and Scarlet Witch are the only girls on the Avengers? I don't think they have any dialogue together.
Yeah, not ever.
Yeah, they've been kept apart through the movies, haven't they? Because like even in Civil War, they don't actually like their scenes are all separate. They're like one is held in the facility and the other one's running all over the world doing tasks for Stark, right?
Yeah. So like if you want to have proper representation of women in your movies, you need to treat them like you treat the men in your movies. You have to give them not just the big moments, but the small moments. You have to have them have the jokey interactions with other people in exactly the same way. And if you just throw all of your women together in a one scene where they have, the fights and the punches and stuff, okay, that's great. But what led up to that?
Yeah, but you can pass the Bechdel test by having 4 women fight each other, and then after the fight go, you did a great job.
But except that this fight doesn't even pass the Bechdel test because they're all doing it to protect Vision, who has a robot penis.
Wow, that's actually true.
Yeah.
It is interesting if you think about it broadly, like the relationship that the women have to the whole group. Like, it's very girlfriend. Like, Black Widow, she is friends with Steve. She is friends with Hawkeye. She is part of the group only because of her relationships with these men. And then, like, a similar thing ends up happening with Scarlet Witch, where she's really only part of the group insofar as Vision is keeping her attached to the group, it seems like. So they both have, very big, like, I'm only here because my boyfriend's here energy.
Okoye, I would say, is probably the most well-realized of any of those, and she's only been in 2 movies.
Yeah. I just meant of the main Avengers. Then we could talk about
Gamora, too, which...
Well, okay, yeah. We're over an hour, but, like, let's do it. Let's talk about Gamora, because she's, like, we haven't talked about her at all, and she's, like, the second most important character in this movie, so let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, Gamora, like... Unfortunately, I feel like, again, it's another situation where this movie relies on a lot of, like, prior characterization of her, and it doesn't actually give her, like, a lot of room to like, breathe and does establish her character traits. But we see that she's, like, clearly, out of the Guardians of the Galaxy, she's clearly the one with the biggest understanding of the stakes and also the clearest understanding of, like, what she's willing to do to save people's lives. And I don't know. I think it's kind of wild that they made the decision, along with everything else that we've discussed here, to, like, have her be such an important role, have her have a relationship with Thanos that has so many hooks. It's like, this is a father figure who is a super problematic father. He literally kidnapped you as a child and made you into a child soldier. I found it kind of weird that there was that they went with this, like, they were trying to portray a complex, relationship between the two, but ultimately on her end, it literally is just, I want to kill you at pretty much every point. There isn't, like, she doesn't really hesitate. She stabs him and then gets deleted by the reality stone again. It really does give her, like, Gamora's character is just completely robbed of all agency in the movie in almost every way, down to the point that they just kill her horrifically halfway through the movie. And I'm not saying that I think that it's wrong to have, like, the character die. I mean, she started the movie by going, I know I'm probably going to have to die to take this guy down, but I need to do that. But the way that it was done, like, where she's ultimately becomes her storyline ends as a way to further increase, like, Thanos's perspective is just a very weird decision for this movie. And I think it does play in the line to what we're talking about of these movies. Just, they really do not give much of a shit about their female characters. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, like, ultimately, sure, there's, like, some emotional hooks here. You can see, oh, she was treated badly by this guy. Isn't that sad? Well, she's dead now, and it was to advance Thanos' story.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It was 100% the fridge trope, just specifically to serve his development, for sure.
I think when we get into the next movie, I think Nebula is treated a little better in that regard. Nebula's, like, barely in this one, but, like, in Endgame, she's kind of a main character. But yeah, like, Nebula is literally introduced just, she's already been caught and she's being tortured, and that's, like, her first introduction in the movie. And then, like, she escapes, and then she goes and throws her ship at Thanos, and that's it. That's all we get from her. Which, like, when you're juggling, like, 40 fucking characters in a movie, it's kind of hard to give everybody the time that they deserve.
Oh, I didn't even mention. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I didn't even talk about the Gamora and Star-Lord stuff, which is like a ton of her time on screen that isn't with Thanos is her establishing how much their relationship matters. And then afterwards, the pretty much only real mention that we get of Gamora as a character is from Star-Lord being mad that she's dead, to the degree that it extremely stupidly interrupts their defeat of Thanos. Like, it's like it's literally like a my wife, like
My
type
wife.
situation where it's like,
I
oh,
would-
like,
While it was very stupid that he did it, I think it was very true to his character.
sure,
He was kidnapped when he was 8, right after seeing his mom die. So he's emotionally stunted, and has problems forming attachments, and so like that's kind of been his arc through the MCU. So I think having that very, like, you know, the fake bravado that he puts on, and like the emotional instability that he has, I think that was all. It definitely fucked everyone over, that's for sure. But I think it was true to his character. I remember a lot of people who were like mad that he had been written to even do that, and I'm like, no, that felt very in line with his character.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that like it's completely out of the picture that like he messes up a plan because of his emotional like instability. I do feel like maybe they went a little too far with it, because it truly makes him seem like one of the stupidest characters in the entire MCU. To be like, oh, like I'm like standing here and this guy is nearly defeated, and I literally just slap him in order to get like nothing, and then he can destroy the entire universe as a result.
You know those memes where like it's like 9 pictures and it's like, thank you for your, and then like the middle
Not
one is
you.
not you.
Yeah,
And like, so like I think it was Quill was the not you for all the memes after Infinity War came out. And that's fair.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But yeah, I mean, I think like, I do think it's kind of weird that like Gamora's entire presence in the movie is pretty much filtered between her relationship to Star-Lord and her relationship to Thanos, and she gets almost no room for us to explore her as a character at all, even though she has an incredibly important role in the movie. You know, we even in, you know, her memories of her life, it's not like we see very much that's not including Thanos. Like, her memories are defined by her experience with Thanos, and I believe that that's a theme that can be explored very interestingly. You know, that you
should
like,
watch
wow,
Guardians Volume 2, because I think it's explored.
I've heard that one's good.
Because like you'll notice here, because like you've only seen the first Guardians, right? And Nebula is just a straight villain in that one. She's still working with Thanos, and it's Guardians 2 where that really explores the sisterhood between Gamora and Nebula, and how Thanos had pitted them against each other, and how they're both just children of abuse who needs to learn to heal and grow together beyond him. And I think James Gunn probably understands how to handle that better than the Russos. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't seen all that much James Gunn, but I do get the feeling that he takes his characters all across the board a little more seriously than movies like this one, where it's like there's a I mean, I don't know. I liked the first Guardians one, and I felt like that was I remember liking that movie, and I've seen it again since, and I was like, oh, this is pretty solid. Like, it's a movie where a lot of time is spent giving you time to understand these characters and who they are and what they stand for and what makes them different and what makes them good as a team. Why do they work as a team? And I don't know. I think that's kind of a ideal first movie for like a ensemble type thing. But yeah.
Anyway, let's get our last thoughts in. So Moss.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a ton more to add. I mean, this is an entertaining movie as far as the entertainment factor goes. In a lot of the Marvel movies, this one is up there. But it has a lot of areas where I think it could be better. And like, this is, I think, one of the situations where you could have had a longer movie and it would have probably benefited from that a little bit. But, I know that everybody at this point feels like the Marvel universe is so bloated. So anywhere you can trim the fat is going to be good, it feels like. But yeah, then we just have these movies that kind of fall flat. We don't get to flesh out the relationships. We don't really have that deep of an emotional connection with our characters. So yeah, I mean, yeah, popcorn rating is like 5 out of 10 for this one.
All right, Demon Mama.
Well, I feel like I've mostly said what I have to say about this movie. I didn't like how hollow it was and how much it felt like this is, in my opinion, probably the least enjoyable of the movies that we've watched, just because I just felt like there was nothing going on with any of the characters, and I don't really care for the punchy CGI stuff. I look forward to watching Endgame. I hope that it's different than this. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. That's my summary.
All right. So, Moss, I was watching your stream yesterday and you said that the last thing that you were going to be recording in this studio was this podcast. So,
Yeah.
next time we reconvene, you will have moved, which means Thanos is snapping that studio away. And we record these pretty far in advance, like about a month in advance. But if something comes up with your move and the next episode is delayed by a bit, just blame Thanos.
It's true.
I would blame Thanos.
It's all Grimace's
It's easy to
fault.
blame Thanos. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. I've been Gayfesh,
I'm Moss.
And I'm Demon Mama.
and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.